Hello, I am back with a new video. This one is going to be about the CAN data bus. A lot of questions arise about this. It's so simple to understand, yet people overcomplicate it. So I'm going to do this with a few squares, one marker, and hopefully under a minute. You connect to the OBD port. The onboard diagnostic port is going to not only connect to the engine, to the trans, and maybe even to a specific module, but it's also going to have a data line going to a gateway, something that communicates between different CAN systems. There's a drivetrain, then there's an interior, there may even be a chassis for ESP and traction. So we'll just try to keep this simple. Basically, there's a high line and a low line, two wires communicating all the time between all the modules. All right, they can connect to each other like this, to where if this one wants to talk to the OBD port, to get to the SAM, the scanner is going to go through the engine to connect to the trans to the SAM, or the body control module, or the TIPM. This is just generic info. If you cannot talk to one of these, you've got to make sure this wire is good between these two control modules. If the wire checks out and you can't read this, then it's possible one of these failed. The best you can do is maybe take the trans module out and connect the engine directly to the SAM and see if you communicate. Basically, all the CAN is an internal internet for everything to talk. Now, if the instrument cluster needs engine information, it's not going to go straight to the engine for the most time. Most times it'll go through a central gateway, or in the Mercedes, an EIS, which is the gateway, to get the information for the engine. So the engine is going to have two wires going to the EIS, but not direct. All right. So let's say the cluster needs temperature information from the engine. What's going to happen is all of we'll say the engine bay modules are going to have two wires. All right. And they're all going to be connected to the same, what we call bus bar. All the bus bar is two metal strips that connect all of the low lines to one bus bar, and then all of the high lines to the other bus bar. Okay. Now, from my experience, voltage is 2.5 volts on either CAN, and all they are is redundant signals, so the signals are constantly going back and forth. But we don't care about that because we never measure that. The only time we measure it is to see if it's opened or shorted. That's about it. There's never a time we measure it and are like, oh no, we're one voltage. We don't go that far. Never have I had one. Not saying we can't. I've just never had one like that. Usually it's either working or it's not. So this bus bar is going to be connected to the central gateway. Then from the central gateway, and it doesn't have to be called a central gateway, but that whatever module does that function to connect the chassis to the interior to the drivetrain. So the door module and the instrument cluster and whatever else is on the interior, could be 1, could be 20 different modules. They're going to have their own bus bar, and there's going to be two wires to each of them. Same thing, low side, high side, and two strips of metal inside this for low side, high side, and that's going to go to the EIS. So transfer is all going to take place in here. Basically, every module is sending out data all the time, nonstop. This sends out everything it wants to on these lines, and this will see everything that's sending out, but it only reads what's meant for that. So this may send out, 010101 coding, and this doesn't need to send it that way, so it doesn't care. But the door module knows that the cluster needs some information from it, or vice versa. So that's what picks it up. So anytime you have a CAN issue where modules do not communicate, there's three things we check. Do we have power to the module? Do we have ground to the module? And do we have CAN connection between the module and whatever it's supposed to connect to? If you have all of those, then the control module is faulty. But you're going to have failure in one of these, either power to the module, ground to the module, or the CAN is going to be shorted. If you have a CAN bus bar like this, there's 7 modules connected to it, get my math right, and water gets in here. Water can short one small pin, which means nothing can talk to each other. Anytime you hook up an OBD scanner and it says no communication, 9 times out of 10, it's water somewhere in a module. The other one time, it's broken wires or just natural corrosion due to age, sometimes a poor connection. So I hope this helps explain CAN a little bit more It can go way in depth, but basically it's two wires in most cars that connect between all the different modules. In some GM cars that I know of, it's a single data line which goes to module to module to module. And I'm not too sure about other brands, but you have to have the diagram to see what CAN wires connect to what connection, and and what else is on that CAN line. By process of elimination, if I hook up to the OBD port and I got no communication, and I know that the OBD starts at the engine module and then goes to these other modules, well, I've got to start with the engine module to see what's going on over here. Do I got connection? Do I got power? Do I got ground? If all that's good, then I disconnect this CAN line to take everything out of the equation. And if I connect to the engine, that tells me something else on here is killing it. Just go down the line. Hook the trans back up, hook the body control module, whatever else back up. Take one out at a time, one plug out at a time, and see which brings the system back online. Whichever one does, that's the problem. If you read fault codes and you have 20 control modules with fault codes, he's got a fault code, he's got a fault code, he's got a fault code, and they all say cannot communicate with central gateway, but central gateway says no fault code, that's usually the guy. They're all snitching on him. He's not reporting any issue with nobody else. You can't talk from the cluster. The cluster has codes with the central gateway. The door module has codes with the central gateway. Then that's your problem. If you've got 10 modules saying there's a problem with the cluster, but the cluster says everything's fine, that's your problem 9 times out of 10. All right. Diagnosing the CAN is super, super easy. If you got problems, hit me up. Let me know. You can find me at www.cartechconnect.com, and I can help you diagnose your issues. Thank you.